If you have never heard the term weird, unsocialized homeschoolers, then I don't know. Are you even a homeschooler? I was on Instagram this morning and I was watching a reel. It was like a podcast interview, and it was a girl who had been homeschooled sharing her experience. And I was actually shocked at how many comments there were underneath the video, specifically regarding socialization and how homeschooling is so terrible for kids because they're not socialized. And I just cannot believe that in this day and age, that is still an issue. And so I wanted to do a video about it. I have actually had this video planned for weeks and weeks and weeks. But I just saw that this morning and I was like, that's good timing because I really want to speak to that. So I know I am predominantly speaking to homeschoolers here, but I think this is good whether you're a homeschooler or not. I think anyone is going to get something out of this video because I want to talk to homeschoolers specifically as well. And just address the topic of socialization. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, keep watching. So if you've never seen my face before, and you're like, who is this lady talking about homeschooling and socialization? I am Christine. I'm a second generation homeschooler. I was homeschooled from age 11, all the way up to graduation. And I am homeschooling my kiddos. And in case you're worried, or you're concerned, or you're wondering, I feel like I'm pretty well socialized and I know how to socialize pretty well. In fact, my own husband will tell you that I am better at socializing than he is, and he attended public school all the way through. So there's something to be said for that. But I share homeschool content here, so that is what my channel is all about, and I just like to share tips and tricks and encouragement and that kind of thing. So go ahead and subscribe if you want more of that. But today I'm going to talk to you specifically about homeschool and socialization because obviously it is still a topic of much interest in 2023. The ignorance in the comments on that reel were just kind of alarming to me. I'm like, how do people still think that homeschool children are so deprived? Like, one of the comments was something like, she was a teacher and she said, I just cannot get behind the children being homeschooled. I mean, like, they need more interaction than just their family. Like, do people really think that homeschoolers just, like, never leave their homes? It's like when people talk about stay-at-home moms, like, they don't do anything but stay at home. Like, what? So, and there wasn't just one of those comments. There were multiple. And so I was just like, really? This is what people really think that homeschool kids end up like. And also there was a comment to the effect of, children need to be spending time with kids their own age, and they need to be challenged by their peers. And I don't disagree with that, but I do disagree with the concept that that is what socialization is. What a good, healthy socialization is that you only are with children your own age and that you're challenged by them. Because I think that healthy socialization doesn't look like that at all. That's maybe a part of it, but it's not the whole picture. So I'm going to maybe break this down into those who are curious about homeschooling and are concerned about the socialization aspect. And then I also want to speak to homeschoolers because I think that there's some stuff to be addressed there as well. And this is... Before I jump into this sounds like I am all-knowing. I so am not, but I do think that perhaps my firsthand experience of being homeschooled and now homeschooling my own children can be helpful and can be really reassuring for those of you who maybe do have concerns. And so that's why I'm talking about this, not because I am a know-it-all, but purely because I think that maybe life experience can be of comfort and reassurance to other people who don't have that. For instance, I don't have a lot of the insecurities about homeschooling that my mom did because she was the first to do it in her family. She was met with a lot of questioning and stuff from other family members, whereas for me, I know that we turned out okay. I know of many other homeschool families that did really well, and so I don't have the same insecurities she may have had. So, I hope that makes sense. So anyway, first of all, if you are looking at looking into homeschooling and your concern is a lack of socialization, I want to challenge you to really consider what healthy socialization is. I want you to consider what we think of as socialization for kids and how that then looks in adulthood and how that will help them in adulthood. So that lady's comment about children needing to be with people their own age and being challenged by their peers. I agree with being challenged by their peers. I do agree that children need to be, I think it's natural and it's a good way for them to learn their limits, to learn social skills, to learn all that kind of stuff. However, I do not necessarily agree that it has to be with children their own age. I don't know where that concept comes from, because as adults, we very rarely only interact with people our own age. We have some people our own age, and we have some people that are like all over. Like, I just think of my friend groups and people I love and interact with all the time, and they're of all different ages. I think what is more true in adulthood is that we interact with people more so in the same stage of life that we're in, rather than the same age. For instance, a lot of my friends are a good 10 years my senior because they had their children then, whereas I had mine younger. And we're friends because we're in the same stage of life, not because we're the same age. In your workplace, you usually work with people of all different ages. It's very, very rare that you're working with people who are all the same age as you. It doesn't happen. So I just think that it's important to understand that in the adult world, that is not a thing. Like, interacting with people your own age on a daily basis, and that is the most healthy form of socialization. It's not. And when we do that, we limit our children so much. Why do we think that our children are going to learn healthy social skills from children their own age? Like, wouldn't you want some maturity or seniority, like, to be filtering down those things that your kids are learning? And I don't mean obviously you want to be careful with the kind of things your kids are learning. But as far as social skills go, I don't want my kids to necessarily be learning good social skills from 7-year-olds, like my 7-year-old with a 7-year-old. Like, I'd rather them be learning in more from mature things. And I think there needs to be a range and a variation. And so I just would like to challenge that thinking. Why do we think that being in a classroom with kids the same age is the ideal way to learn good social skills? So that's just something to consider. I also really get my feathers ruffled when people talk badly about, like, oh, well, they can't just be with their family all day. Because the reality is, society nowadays does not encourage being with family all day. In fact, they do the complete opposite. The family is torn apart into a whole bunch of different activities, this for this age group, this for that age group, and everyone's running around doing their own thing. And in, like, TV shows and so many things, there's always sibling rivalry. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist. It 100% exists with my children. But a friendship between siblings is not encouraged. In fact, it's almost seen as like, ugh, you're like, why are you only friend? Like, why is your sister your best friend or whatever? And I just think that's gross. Like, I think it's horrible. And I think it is a way to destruct the family and not to bring it together. And my parents did a fantastic job of fostering a family culture of love and friendship. And now, as adults, all of my siblings are some of my dearest friends, and they're the people that I trust the most. And I know not everyone has that family situation. I totally understand that. But this whole idea of, like, not being friends with your family, or that your family can't give you the social interaction that you need, is just, it's wrong. It's just wrong. And I'm not saying that we don't, take our kids out into the world and interact with other people, but ultimately it does start at home. And instead of going first to seek social skills from outside the home, we should be doing it first inside the home. Speak kindly to one another, treat each other with respect and love and care. Because if your kids are doing that out, like at school, they can be kind to the kids' school, and then they come home and they're terrible to each other, like, really, like, we need to learn to be the most loving to the ones who are the closest to us, because, yeah, they get on our nerves, because we're with them all the time. But that's where it starts. It starts in the home. And so I think that society downplays how much goodness can be taught in the home first. So, I just think my siblings are my best friends, my parents. I have such a good relationship with them, and we love each other dearly, and I'm so grateful that that was able to be fostered through homeschooling. And that's not the only way to do it, obviously, but homeschooling can play a huge part in that. So, yeah. And then the other thing, I was talking to some of my homeschool mom friends about this just this last week. We had a homeschool meetup, and the kids were all playing. We get together at a skate park, and the kids are all playing. They bring their scooters, and there's a playground. And I just was like talking about how you can see the kids pushing each other. Now, these kids are all different ages. Okay, we've got kids, I think my youngest is the youngest, or maybe there's one maybe a little bit younger, but like we're talking like 3-4 years old up to about age 11 at the moment. And so that's all of like your preschool through elementary ages, and they're all together, and they're all learning from each other. And so the older kids learn how to be gentle and kind to the younger children. The younger children maybe get pushed a little bit to do things that otherwise be afraid to do. And then they learn their boundaries, and they learn their capabilities, whether it's like, intellectual or physical or whatever. They're learning that. And there's just beauty in having so many different ages together. So I feel like I've kind of really gone over that concept of being with the same age group does not mean that your children are going to be taught fantastic social skills by any means. And I think that we need to look outside of that. And whether your children are homeschooled or attending school, like, we just need to get out of that mindset that they need peers their own age in order to be successful socially. And I can speak from personal experience. I very rarely had friends my own age. My friends were almost always 2 years my senior. And I did just fine. And also this concept of like kids need lots of friends. Like, no, they don't. I'm sorry. But no, it's about quality and not quantity. And it also depends on your personality type. I'm an introvert. I don't ever desire to go out in big, crowded situations and like have lots of loud girl nights and all that kind of. I've never liked that. It's just not my thing. I love a one-on-one coffee date. Or, just a small selection of friends. And I would rather have friends who I can trust and who I know really have my best interest at heart, and just have one of those friends, as opposed to having scores of friends who are just sort of like loosey-goosey and, aren't really true friends. So that's something to be aware of as well. Like, we just kind of stereotype these things and put them into a box. So I can say confidently that I've done well in the adult world after having been homeschooled. My social skills, I feel like, are pretty good. I don't like big crowds and new situations, but I think a lot of people fall into that, whether they are homeschooled or whether they went to traditional school. I think that's more about your personality type than it is about your social skills. And I do think that there are some homeschoolers who don't have the greatest social skills, more so from my generation than now. But that's more about a family culture than it is specifically homeschooling, because there's about 1,000 ways to homeschool. And so it's about what you do with your kids. Yeah, that's like a whole thing. We could go really, really deep into this, but those are just some of the things that I would say to someone who is thinking about homeschooling, but socialization is holding them back. I would also just say that homeschooling gives you so much more flexibility as far as the time you have in a day. And so you can have your child enrolled in a lot more activities or a lot more different experiences than they would be able to have if they were going to a public school or just a traditional school, private school, whatever. And so you can really encourage specific socialization if you wanted that. Like, there's just lots more freedom and flexibility. And there are tons of activities available. And that is it's the good segue into talking to homeschoolers now, those of you who are homeschooling. And I have had this question several times now, and I wanted to address it. And it's something that I have spoken to new homeschoolers about a lot in the last couple of years, because we've had a lot more homeschoolers join in our community in the last couple of years. And it's this concept of, I feel like we overcompensate because there is such a stigma with homeschoolers and lack of socialization. We as homeschool parents can have a tendency to overcompensate. Or like we take them out of school and we feel like they're going to miss out on specific things, so we overcompensate to make up for that lack thereof. And I just want to speak to you as a homeschool mom that your kids don't need all of the experiences. And there is something to be said for the less is more. It just is. And I see homeschool parents do it all the time. They pull their kids out of school and they start homeschooling and they sign them up for like a bunch of different activities because we need to have them out there and they need to be socializing and they need all this different exposure, and they get burnt out. Like so quickly they get burnt out, and all of a sudden homeschooling loses its shiny appeal, and it is not the solution that these families were hoping for. And the reality is that any one of us would get burnt out doing all those things. Extracurriculars are beautiful and wonderful and fun, but they can very, very quickly become overwhelming when there's too many of them. And this problem of burnout is not something that's unique to this generation of homeschoolers. It was something that still applied back when my mom was homeschooling. I remember her having to pull back from a whole bunch of activities because our family was just off in different directions all the time, and it was too stressful. And so it's not a unique problem. It's not new, but it is one that needs to be addressed because we need to slow down. We don't need to be cramming our kids' days full to the brim with activities. If it works for your family, that's fine. But if it is not working, if it is not bringing joy to your family, then I want to give you permission to step back and say no and be okay with less. Because our kids don't need they don't need ballet and soccer and art and swimming lessons and all those things in order to develop good social skills or to have socialization. Like really, it's socialization doesn't necessarily have to be something that we are super intentional about. It just should naturally happen as we interact with the world around us. It can be a little bit more challenging if you are an introvert and your child is perhaps introverted, but I also don't think we need to go overboard. We just need to look at what the world looks like naturally and just make sure we're interacting with it in that way. So yeah, like one activity a week, it's fine. My kids each have one thing that they're enrolled in as far as extracurricular activities, and quite frankly, they're not enrolled in them for socialization. That is not it. That is not the reason I enrolled them in it. There are lots of other reasons, and maybe some socialization is like a byproduct of it, but it's not the main reason I did it. My children have been socializing with our neighbors since the times that they could talk. I would catch them up on the fence and chatting with them. And I just don't think that we need to be like, okay, I need to set this up so my child has social activities. It's a very modern day concept, and I feel like it does the opposite of what we're trying to do because we're forcing these situations and our kids get burnt out and we get burnt out, and it just isn't helpful to anyone. So I wanted to speak to that specifically. However, I do know that it can be very lonely when you are homeschooling and you don't perhaps have a community that you have managed to join in. And so I wanted to talk to anyone who is in that situation as well, how to find those communities. It is hard. For the first couple of years I was homeschooling, there was not much. There was a little bit, but also I had a little baby. It was hard to get out the house. So I would encourage you to remember that there are seasons to everything and that those will ebb and change, and things can change there. But also you do need to be a little proactive. You have to be brave. The first time, so let me tell this story. When I joined in our current homeschool group that we meet up with, the first time I was supposed to meet up at this lady's house who I'd never met before, and she's now a dear friend now, but I never met her before, and several other homeschoolers were supposed to meet up there. Well, it turned out I was the only one who showed up, and so I went to this complete stranger's house, and we ended up chatting for like 2 hours, and ever since then we had hit it off. But that was not a comfortable situation for me at all, like to go to somebody's house I had never met before. And I ended up being the only one there with my kids, but it was such a good thing. And so sometimes as the parent, we do have to put ourselves out there and make some brave choices and look for things. Facebook groups are fantastic places to find community and find out where things are happening locally. Sometimes it's through extracurricular activities. You can find out other things. Sometimes it's through your local church. There are different ways. You might need to be creative and you might need to be patient. You also might need to be the one to start the group. Sometimes there are other people looking for those things, but they haven't thought to start them. So if you have like a local like a Facebook page, you could just put an announcement there. Hey, are there any other home educators in the area? I'd like to start up a group, that kind of thing. So I would encourage you to look outside the box and be intentional in that way. But also don't put too much pressure on yourself or your kids to socialize because it's overdone. Like we're so busy socializing these days that we don't have time to just like think, you know? So yeah. And everyone's different, you know? Some people, I actually love meeting up with friends and stuff, but not every day, not even close to every day. Once a week is good. And then I'm like, okay, now I need some time to decompress. And that's just the way my introverted self works. Extroverts might want that every single day. And sometimes it's good for our kids to learn balance, you know, to learn a little bit of both and for us to learn a little bit of both too. So I hope this was helpful. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Keep them respectful. And if you know a weird, unsocialized homeschooler, and you can like, you know, say, well, I know this homeschool family. You know what? I know public school kids who are also weird and unsocialized. So I know it's easy to pick on the homeschoolers. And that's that. And then something else that I'll say that is not a popular thing to say, but I believe it wholeheartedly, is I would rather my children be awkward socially and their souls be secure in the Lord and they have a strong relationship with Him and they have a good relationship with their family. I would rather that and have them be weird and unsocialized than to fit in and conform with the rest of society but be lost and desperately unhappy. And I'm not saying that everyone who's, you know, not homeschooled is that way at all. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that social skills, while important, are less important to me than the souls of my kids. And so, yeah. And I also just think that, like, it's okay to be weird. You know, it's okay to be yourself. And that while we're often said, well, it's often said that diversity and et cetera, is embraced, the reality is we're being pushed to conform to whatever, you know, somebody else decides is normal. And so let your kids stand up and be themselves and be weird and unique and wonderful, because that is who God made them. And so, yeah, I'll end with that. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye.
If the world had more of your smile, what if the wind could spread your love? What if your sweet